comfort women too. This is opinion of American author Michael Yon on this issue. Mr. Kent Gilbert introduced opinion of U.S. author on Korean comfort women as follows. Michael Yon, a highly respected and skillful U.S. author, gave me permission to translate into Japanese and share with you an English article which he put out yesterday. This is his original English text of it. Next. Japan, Korea, were Korean men cowards during World War II? Vexing question. Here are growing, unsubstantiated questions about whether the Japanese Imperial Army kidnapped 200,000 sex slaves, comfort women, in World War II. Mostly from Korea. A $30 million government study specifically searched for evidence on comfort women allegations. After nearly 7 years with many dozens of staff pouring through U.S. archives, and $30 million down the drain, we found a grand total of nothing. The final IWG report to Congress was issued in 2007. Shown below. Nobody should be writing about comfort women issues without reading this report cover to cover. Many of the unsubstantiated claims are coming from Korea. Korean allegations have led to unexpected twists. Next. Korean during Second World War. At the time, Korea was actually part of Japan, roughly in the way that Puerto Rico is part of the USA. Many Koreans were members of the Japanese military. So any allegations that the Japanese military kidnapped 200,000 women implies that Koreans were involved in kidnapping Koreans. This is an uncomfortable reality. It gets even more uncomfortable. So today, South Korean President Park Jeong-hui constantly accuses Japan of kidnapping these shiploads of women. Imagine how this boomerangs back. President Park is saying that Japan, and her daddy was an officer in the Japanese army at the time, kidnapped uncounted tens of thousands of women from Korea as sex slaves. Yet there is no evidence that Korean men fought back. Next. During the war, Korea had a population of about 23 million. Today, Texas has a population of about 26 million. Imagine trying to kidnap 200,000 Texas women. There would be a bloodbath. The army would lose thousands of soldiers, and thousands of civilians no doubt would have been slaughtered in return. Evidence would be everywhere. Photos. Films. Battle sites. Texans would never allow 200,000 women to be stolen and raped without making a river of blood. So President Park is essentially saying Korean men during World War II were a bunch of cowards. Next. Imperial Japanese Army. Also imagine this from the perspective of a Japanese military general or admiral. He is at war with the USA, Australia, Britain, China, and more. His hands are full. The USA in particular is on the march with our Navy and Marines, and we are smashing Japan anywhere we can find Japanese. All generals always want more troops and supplies. That is a fact of life. Just ask any general. Ask any business leader what he or she needs to expand or defend against competition. They always want more resources. Next, what kind of fool general would dedicate the resources to kidnap, guard, transport, and feed 200,000 women, knowing that he is creating yet another war to fight? The Japanese were highly advanced military thinkers. They made their own submarines, airplanes, and aircraft carriers. These were serious people, and super smart. Next, there is no way that generals would dedicate those resources to kidnapping women when the US military and allies were marching down their throats. They had a war to fight. This was not spring break. Any serious military or business person can see the folly and common sense of kidnapping 200,000 women. It does not make sense, and would have created a new war in Korea, which was a base for Japanese recruitment. Koreans were fighting Americans. Koreans were our enemy. Next. And back to Korean men. It would be horrific to see the US Army try to kidnap 200,000 Texas women, especially so considering that many US military members are Texans, just as many Koreans were Japanese soldiers. Texas would rise up and start smashing the army. Bridges would blow up. Soldiers would be shot every day. Bases would burn. The army would fight back and there would be total war. So are we to believe that Korean men are such cowards that nobody lifted a hand to defend their women? Because if they allowed these many women to be kidnapped, they are cowards, and their sons today had cowards for fathers. Next. The reality is that we know that Koreans are no cowards. Koreans are a courageous people. So what really happened? It is clear from source documents, and the common sense that every water buffalo possesses, that there was no mass kidnapping. It's all a lie, and no matter how much someone hates Japan, it will always be a lie. Next, please read the IWG report that practically nobody seems to know exists. If you do not have time for the whole report, do a search inside the report for comfort women, and carefully read those parts. http://www.archives.gov/ IWG/ Report as Final Report 2007 PDF. End of his opinion. Next. Followings are my comments on this issue. Total number of comfort women was about 20,000. They were consisted of Japanese, Korean, Chinese, and others. Korean women were less than Japanese women. What is Korean's objectives of this propaganda in US? One is to break good relationship between US and Japan. Japan is very weak without supports of US. The other is to conceal North Koreans' crime of kidnapping of many Japanese young men by offset. Miss Megumi Yokota was kidnapped at 13 years old in 1977. She has been detained in North Korea still now. Korean thinks they can deceive American easily, because most of American don't have enough knowledge of Asian history and culture. Next, Japanese hopes American not to be cheated by Korean propaganda. Please stop Korean brush-washing of American young men, through public education of Korean comfort women in schools. Please forbid Korean to use US fine public spaces for their dirty propaganda. Next, thank you very much for your kind concerns about Korean comfort women issue. Japanese wish to keep good relationship with US. End.